Yeah, I rang Beaky Sims, Dave Sims, who is a very good friend of mine, lovely guy. I rang him on April the 7th, which was the day of memory of Jimmy's passing at Hockenheim, because Beaky was the mechanic on Jimmy's car that day. Horrendously traumatic day for him, as you can imagine. And he just said, you know, there isn't an April the 7th that goes by when he just doesn't feel very depressed all day. So I rang him and we chatted away. And we started to talk about racing things as we do. And I said, well, you at 67, what were you doing, Beaky? As a matter of interest, bearing in mind Jimmy was driving the Lotus 48 Formula 2 car in 67, and that was the car, of course, in which he had his accident in 68. And he said, oh, no, I wasn't on Jimmy's car, but I was doing Formula 2 on Jack Oliver's Lotus Components Lotus 41C, which was a bit of a weird car. It was a space frame Formula 3 car with a Cosworth FVA 1600 Formula 2 engine in the back. And that was the car Beaky was on. And Bob Sparshott, I think, was on Graham Hill's 48. And I think Alan McCall was on Jimmy's Lotus 48 when they were green and yellow in 67. So we started talking about that. And then he said, oh, God, 67. He said, it's the biggest problem for me. I'm kind of simulating the way Beaky Sims talks. He said, you know, we're staying in the town and they had these aluminium, telegraph poles and lamp posts and everything else. And somebody said, I wonder if they bend when you get to the top of them. So, of course, we all started to climb up these aluminium posts to see, and one of them did bend. He said, anyway, no. The gendarmerie came along and arrested 4 Lotus mechanics and took them down to the local clink. And there they hung out for a bit. This was Saturday night before the Formula 2 race at Rouen 67, the mid-July, the weekend before the British Grand Prix at Silverstone. And sure enough, eventually, I think it was one of the officials came along and said, look, these guys are all from England. Sorry, they've caused all this trouble. Motor racing mechanics work for Team Lotus. And Bob Dance and the 2 others said, yeah, brilliant, okay. And then Beaky got up to leave the cell. And they said, oh, hang on a sec, this guy's not with us. We don't know this guy at all. And so they just locked the cell again, leaving Beaky there on his own for I don't know how long. But eventually, a couple of hours later, I guess, Jim Clark turned up and said, Beaky, what you been doing? And, he got him out of prison. And so Beaky said, the sort of guy Jimmy was. He thought it was very funny, but equally, he did actually feel quite sorry for Beaky, even though he wasn't on Jimmy's car at the time. Anyway, so it made me think, APArchives, here we are. We've got this amazing situation with AP. I wonder if there's any footage of that 67 Formula 2 race at Rouen. And before we get to it, just let me introduce it. There was, again, it's pretty short, it's black and white, but it is the Formula 2 race Rouen 67. And it's interesting for another reason, and that is because I interviewed Jack Brabham once when he was in England at the site, actually, of his Esso garage in Hook Road in Chessington, which was a jet garage by then, but he still had an office in the back. And we were chatting away. I did this interview, and I was talking to him about Jimmy, actually. And I said, do you think it was a puncture? And he said, oh, yeah, it was a puncture at Hockenheim. But, of course, the problem was Jimmy would always drive through problems. They used to say that about Jochen Rindt as well. Always drive through problems until he had to bring the car in. And he said a good example of that was the 67 Formula 2 race at Rouen, when he had a big battle with Jimmy. Jack was in a Brabham Cosworth FVA at that point, having won a lot of races with the Honda in 66, but they went to the FVA in 67. So it was Jack Brabham in the Brabham, and it was Jim Clark in the Lotus 48, having a big dice at Rouen, very, very dangerous, fast circuit with one hairpin, wheel-to-wheel stuff. Jackie Stewart's in there with the Tyrrell Matra, Jochen Rindt with the Winkelmann Brabham. And Jack said he was behind Jimmy, and he could see one of the rear tires starting to go down on Jimmy's 48. And he said, I was trying to get alongside him into the braking area, into the hairpin, to wave to him, to show him that there was something going on. And he said Jimmy did 2 laps with that tire starting to deflate, and then had an enormous lose, and Jack hit him and they both crashed. Both okay, but it was a quick part of the circuit. And it shows in another perspective, doesn't it? We talk about Hockenheim in 68 and the unimportant race, but I mean, Jimmy had a lot of incidents in Formula 2 because it was so close, and they were racing quite a lot on these dodgy circuits. And so that was the Jack Brabham point. You know, what we saw at Hockenheim, kind of we saw at this race at Rouen in '67. Okay, with no more ado then, let's have a look at the French Rouen circuit, road circuit, very fast road circuit, 1967 Formula 2 race. So there's the Cathedral City, there's the aluminium pole that Beaky Sims tried to climb, maybe pit lane there before the start of the race. Looked like a pretty nice day. Not a lot of cloud there. There's the grid up there. Toto Roche was the starter. There's Jimmy driving the 48. He was on the front row alongside Jock and Rindt. The Brabham was definitely a slightly quicker car, but there's Jimmy looking very cool in the 48. Graham Hill having a good chat there, and wearing one-piece overalls. Jimmy usually had the Hinchmans. And there's Jack Brabham, face mate. He's 67. He's the reigning world champion at that point. Driver's briefing. There's the start. Jackie Stewart on the right in the Tyrrell Matra. Jock and Rindt, brilliant in the Winkelmann Brabham away there. Bruce McLaren's in this race too, in one of his beautiful little Formula 2 cars. There's Jochen leading Jackie. And that's Graham Hill, who made a very slow start. He's a lap behind there. But Jackie leading Jochen. He's taken the lead there in the Tyrrell Matra. But both he and Jochen would go off at the top of the circuit. And there's Jean-Pierre Beltoise, losing the factory Matra into braking for the Nouveau Monde hairpin in front of his home crowd. Not a great moment for Jean-Pierre. As Graham he started to go very well. He had a gearbox problem. Then there's Jackie Oliver's 41 that we were just talking about, that white car there. And rejoining, that's Bruce McLaren, had a bit of an off, but he rejoins actually and does a very good job to finish in second place in this race when it's all said and done. So Jackie went off, didn't restart. Jochen went off, did restart. Jochen wins the race, and Jack Brabham, obviously, and Jimmy Clark have had their chance. There's Toto Roche waving the huge checkered flag, the famous Toto Roche. And there's Jochen looking very cool, getting his garland at the end of that Formula 2 race. I used to read about the Winkelmann Racing and how brilliant they were. And of course they were. The car was immaculate. The Brabham was brilliant. Jochen was fabulous. And Bernie Ecclestone was behind a lot of it. Can you believe it? Yeah, he was really close to Winkelmann Racing, based in Slough. And of course he was managing Jochen Rindt at that point as well. So a lot of Bernie's feel for racing, which began with the Stuart Lewis Evans days back in '58, but a lot of it gathering momentum there with that great Jochen Rindt period. But just think about it on a circuit like that, how quick it was down the hill, that we had Jack Brabham, Jackie Stewart, Jochen Rindt, Jim Clark, Bruce McLaren, all in Formula 2 cars, racing really hard and really competitively. And third in that race, interestingly enough, Joe Schlesser in the Ford France financed Matra, blue Matra. Really quick driver, Joe. And I guess to some extent it was that performance, finishing third against that top-class opposition at Rouen, which prompted Honda into selecting Joe to drive their Formula 1 car at the French Grand Prix the following year at Rouen. Knew the circuit well, French driver, good for the crowd. And of course, he lost it in that downhill section. The magnesium chassis Honda burst into flames in the wet, and poor Joe was killed a year later. So it probably all started there. Interestingly as well, to note that on the day that was run, that Rouen Formula 2 race, another Formula 2 race was being held at Hockenheim for what they call the non-graded drivers who were eligible for the Formula 2 championship at that point. That race, amazingly, was won, I say amazingly, because he didn't win many F2 races, was won by Frank Gardner. Very good win, I think, from Chris Irwin. So, yeah, that was that.